What's going on? What's going on? It's your boy Story Seller Jet today here with Josh Culler, my great friend, doing another episode of the Dot So Fire podcast. So I am so excited to have Josh here, and also I don't know, I feel like super excited. Maybe it's the Red Bull talking.
I was gonna say you got a little Red Bull going through your veins right now.
Yep,
So.
that's awesome. But Josh is a really great friend of mine, and I'm gonna let you introduce yourself in a little bit about telling about your story. But he's one of my great friend. We've done work together, doing some really cool stuff, and it's an honor here today to have you in the podcast today, man.
Man, I'm excited. Came into Tampa and I'm like, I really need to get over here. So I texted you yesterday and I'm like, got a little bit of a boring presentation going on right now at the event. So I'm gonna swing on over here and do a podcast with you. So.
Yeah, man, I'm super excited. So let's get going. So first question, let's talk a little bit about Culler Media.
Yeah.
And about your services, what you have to offer. And I know that you had a focus on real estate investors. So tell me a little bit about Culler Media.
Yeah, primarily it's we work with real estate people that are in the real estate investing industry. You know, our clientele is pretty diverse. Like I have people that do self storage. I have people that lend money, hard money. I have people that wholesale, flip, teach it all. Like there's a pretty diverse group. But I've been in the real estate investing space for 10 years now. So like over 10 years. I was actually talking to our good friend Gary Harper because he and I go way, way back. And literally just yesterday, we're like, man, I can now say that I've been in this industry for over 10 years.
That's
not
awesome.
Nearly 10 years over. It makes me feel old, but yeah. So that's primarily the reason why I stay focused in that. But we primarily do three things. It's social media, full management, podcast, full management, and YouTube, full management. It's focused on like the organic content side of, the way that things work. So, the type of client that I work with is somebody that, generally speaking, it's not really just a real estate investor, somebody that is, buying deals only. Normally it's somebody that's teaching it because for that reason, you have you have the ability to put out daily content and stuff like that. So that's ideally my client, but I do want clients that practice what they preach too.
Absolutely.
I think that's important.
So. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, Josh, when I first met you, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 years ago.
It's been a while.
Yeah, it's been a minute.
Yeah.
I know that you are one of the people that are, regarded in a high, pedestal, like in the real estate community as it relates to content marketing. And you do like fantastic job. And yeah.
You've gotten a little taste of that recently.
Oh yeah.
So that's good. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Love working with you guys. You guys are awesome.
Yeah, for sure. So next question. So you have a specific real estate people that you work with. So what inspired you to specifically focus on content marketing for real estate investors?
Well, it goes, I'm not going to spend, like, normally when I answer questions like this, there's like long answer to it. Like there's like a longer story. But for me, I think like I've always had a creative side of myself. I would say like I'm not a full creative though, because mostly full creatives, as you well know, like for the most part, like they can't focus. It's really hard to manage them. No sense of timelines, and hard to communicate with, that sort of thing. Which a lot of people on my team are creatives. A lot of video editors, graphic designers, writers, and you have those kind of problems. Me, I've always been kind of an operator, so I knew I was really, really good at content and social. And it kind of stems back to, I was actually working with our good friend Gary Harper, and he was partners with a couple other people that were wholesaling. We have a pretty large scaled wholesaling organization out in the Midwest.
Yeah.
I live right outside Chicago, so we were in Indiana, Illinois, Michigan, Ohio. And I was, at 19 years old, I got put at their marketing director for the organization.
19 years old?
19 years old, right out of high school.
Wow, yeah. That's crazy.
And I always knew, so like right when I was getting out of high school, I remember, it's kind of funny how just fast, and how fast everything's developed over the last like 10 years when it comes to the internet, social media, just smartphones alone. Because I got my first iPhone, my iPhone 4, a year out of high school, and like Instagram just maybe came out. I remember barely most people had Facebook. MySpace was kind of still around. And so when I got into the position that I was in, I was doing a lot of video marketing to like, and back then wholesaling was a totally different thing. You're not like nowadays you have, a bunch of acquisitions people that are, trying to hunt for deals and that sort of thing. Back then it was like acquisitions was placing bids on HUD and MLS and auction, that sort of thing. And most of the marketing was geared towards building buyers lists.
Wow.
So because of that, you have the opportunity. I think there's a difference because with content marketing, it's all about like, getting in front of people, but also being able to curate them and still continue the relationship after the first transaction
Yeah.
and then bring them back to do another one with you.
Mm-hmm.
So the concept of content marketing worked really, really well for accumulating buyers. It doesn't work terribly well with, trying to get a motivated seller lead to sell you a house because it's transactional.
Yeah.
So it's going to be a lot more like time sensitive. So I'm putting a YouTube video out that's answering a person's question because of a motivation that they have.
Mm-hmm.
And so I started going like harder into that. And then at one point we launched a mastermind all together. And so then we started a podcast for that. And that was really my first kind of entry point into like consistent, like putting out podcasts.
Yeah.
And so learned a lot of that. And at this time, that's probably right around when I was 23, 24, 25 years old. And then, that stemmed into me doing a lot of that. I was doing a lot of branding as well. So I've just kind of been in and around the media space, got more involved with camera work and that sort of thing. And then started accumulating some clients as a side hustle. And then eventually, it's actually March 1 of 2019 is when I went full time into doing this.
Oh, really?
So it's been 5 years this
Wow.
month. Yeah.
I would have thought that you were doing that full time way before that.
No,
That's awesome.
It's been a quick journey.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I started doing my business in 2014, but I didn't go full time until 2017.
Yeah.
So kind of like, similar story there. And it's been fantastic.
It was a side hustle at first. And then, I was doing it for the organization I was working for.
Yeah.
And then there was a big kind of split up for the organization at late 2017. And I went with one of the partners and then just didn't really enjoy working there. So then I decided to move on to doing what I'm doing now.
Cool. Yeah, you work with a lot of really great real estate investors that I know.
Yeah, you know a lot of them.
And obviously you've worked with the Collective Genius. Shout out to the Collective Genius, one of my favorite mastermind and organization. So question here: what strategies do you typically employ to ensure that those clients see tangible results for what you're producing for them?
That's a good question. So whenever I am approached with this type of question, it's always geared towards what does the client want?
Mm-hmm.
It's not the same for everybody. And I try to get it's really hard to kind of get this message across to most people because as a marketer, I could be like, well, it just kind of depends, and then kind of kick the can around and that sort of thing. And then, you never get the answer to the question. But it truly is a matter of, especially if you're looking at the organic side, which is where I focus.
Yeah.
Paid traffic is 10 times easier to like, well, if you spend this much, you can generate between this and this amount of leads. That's a whole lot easier. Organic, you don't really have control. Like with paid, you have control over a budget. You have control over the ad spend that you're putting out on the creative piece of it. With organic, it's just the creative piece that's going out and then volume, the amount that you're putting out. But you're not really controlling anything else. The platforms will control everything after that. So it's a matter of like doing fundamentals correctly, making sure you're doing what the platforms are wanting, and then giving yourself enough at bats and putting volume out. And then from there, after I've had that conversation, I ask the clients, what is your expectation? What are you trying to get out of this? Because to me, if a client comes to me and says, I'm looking to build a YouTube subscriber list of 100,000 YouTube subscribers in 2 years. I'll look at them and say, that's a fantastic goal. I'm not the person for that.
Yeah.
And the reason is because that's not what I specialize in. I don't specialize in YouTube growth specifically. Now, if you do YouTube correctly, which is obviously built on the content that you're putting out, then that will naturally result in the growth of the YouTube channel.
Yeah.
But for the most part, most of my clients, they have a business that they're trying to leverage social and content for to market their business, not social media being the business.
Yeah.
That's the difference.
Yeah. Huge difference.
So I'm geared towards that. For instance, you mentioned Collective Genius. This is a perfect example. So when I met with, and we don't really talk to Jason much anymore because he's got people on his team that help facilitate working with us, like project managers. But when we first onboarded Collective Genius as a client, got on a call with Jason, got on a call with Danielle, and we were nailing down these things. And the only thing Jason was concerned about was, I want more applications for Collective Genius to come through the door. That's the specific reason why I want to do social media.
Yeah.
And I said, awesome. That is scalable. That's something that we can predict. That's something that we can go after. because that just means that all the content is going to be curated towards first of all, qualifying and identifying people that are watching the video that says, yeah, I'm a real estate investor that needs to scale from 100 to 200 deals. I don't know how to do that. This mastermind would be a great fit for me.
Yeah.
Let me go fill this application out.
Yeah.
So something like that.
Yeah. And I think Collective Genius is a really great example of the amazing work that you've been doing too. And that's also a client that we share together.
Yeah.
I film some projects and then you do some other stuff like in the back end.
Yeah.
But like looking over the past 4 or 5 years, like I remember CG had less than 1,000 followers, but now they have over 4,000, like 4 or 5,000.
It's progression. Yeah.
So it's, by being so consistent and posting and you producing all that content for them, obviously they have really great content too.
Oh yeah.
I've really enjoyed seeing that growth and seeing that becoming a authority in the market as it relates to social media.
And you know what's funny is that's an evolution too, because at first, pretty much 100% of the content we would put out for them would be like testimonial type content, which is great. It's good for social proof, but it doesn't necessarily work in generating like engagement and that sort of thing, which again, like it depends on what you're going after. Engagement can result in getting in front of the right person that's going to fill out an application to be in the mastermind. And so last year we got together and we're like, hey, we need to start chopping out content from like the keynote sessions that are because that's where all the meat is.
Yeah.
And if you put that in there, if you take a clip from Mark Delatour talking about how he scaled his insane business in Kansas City to what it is, and you take a clip out of that, and then you put that on social, it's basically creating FOMO for people that are watching it. It's like, wow, that was an awesome 60-second clip. What happens if I actually get into the room and I'm listening to the entire 3-hour session that he's talking about this? Now it goes to a different level.
Absolutely. So. Yeah, that's a really great strategy right there. So what are some of the top people that you've worked what are some of the top people that you've worked with that you can say that is a great case study for you that has grown by a lot?
Yeah, I would say, so there's 2 people coming to mind. Number one is, actually there's 3 people, and I'll give all different examples. So number one would be Lee Arnold is a fantastic client for me, not just because and I'm not even gonna say for like growth reasons, like on our side, just like the intentionality behind what he does. And Lee.
Yeah.
And he's at this mastermind I'm here for now, but he is just an outstanding human being. He runs fantastic businesses and he does what he says he's going to do. So if him and his marketing team say, we're going to get you X amount of videos on a weekly basis, we expect them to come in, and they will come in.
That's
because
awesome.
For the most part, like what my team can do, because we're not doing the filming, is all based on what the client is giving us. And I try to drive that through my client's head as hard as possible, because it's important. Video is important, right? So he's great from that standpoint of view. And we manage YouTube channels for him, socials and stuff like that. And they just have an insane operation. And it's great. I've been at their office before, and it's great seeing what they have going on. And another great example for them is because they have multiple other types of marketing that they do. So they do email campaigns, they do sales floors, they have ads going out, and everything that we do is meshed together. So even though we're a disconnected, not like we're a third-party service provider for them, we're still connected to
their team,
what they're doing on every other, because you want all your marketing to row in the same direction.
Absolutely.
So they're great. Another great client for mine is Deal Machine. So the platform Deal
David
Machine.
Lecco?
Yeah, David Lecco. They have a fantastic marketing team as well that we get to talk to. Elise, shout out to Elise. We get to chat with her on a monthly basis, that sort of thing. But we manage their podcasts. They put out 3 podcasts a week, and once again, like David's the type of guy, like if we're supposed to put out 3 podcasts a week, that can be hard to keep up with.
Yeah.
And he gets it done. He'll make sure that we have everything. He's very strategic and specific on what he wants done. And I mean,
I know that he's very disciplined.
Yes.
I remember a presentation that he did at CG that talked about the 75 hard that he was doing.
Yeah.
And there was a few times that he I think he got today 60 or something, and he missed it. And he went back to day one, which is not a lot of people would do that. They would.
But that's the type of client that I want, because that client is going to get shouted out on a podcast because they're a successful client.
Yeah.
That's the type of person I want, right?
Yeah.
So that my unsuccessful client is the one that isn't consistent. They're not willing to put in time, because this organic content takes time. It's not like Like people think you can put out like a daily post for a month and you're going to go viral. It's
Yeah.
just not how it works.
Yep. I like to say that it takes 90 days of consistency to really start seeing your content to
Yeah.
grow.
I say 6 months.
Yeah.
And I say that if you don't stay consistent with it for a year, then don't do it at all.
Yeah, that's why I said starting to.
Starting to. Yeah.
Starting to.
And then you'll start. So starting to see it is like between 60 and 90 days, as long as you stay consistent with it.
Yep.
And then right around 6 months is when you should start seeing some growth. But then if you haven't committed to a year, then you haven't even really gotten, made a dent into it.
It's really hard though. It's really hard. If you are trying, definitely a commitment. It's a little bit easier when you have people like me or like you that are kind of helping with that.
Sure.
But to come up with tons of content, and being consistent with it, like it's definitely hard.
Yeah.
For that.
So Deal Machine's great. I mean, we do their podcasts, and then also we do their socials as well, and they have like really great socials as well. But another example that I'll use that is kind of like unconventional in a way, but it works is so my longest tenured client, his name's Michael Zuber. He's out in Fresno, California. And he has a brand called One Rental at a Time. So he has a long story that he worked in, Silicon Valley and, became financial free by buying one rental at a time. And now he teaches that as like a program and that sort of thing. But he's a very methodical person in a sense of like, he really wants content to be as raw as possible. So there's not a whole lot of production value behind what we do, but we put out 3 podcasts per day.
What? That's crazy. That's fantastic.
And he puts out 2 to 3 YouTube videos a day, like full YouTube videos, and then that doesn't include like the social stuff. But and I think like and obviously like there's the conversation of like, okay, well, volume versus quantity. Like literally it's stripping the audio from his YouTube videos, putting it on podcasts. And that's what we do. And now he has like a method of like he'll do a couple of recordings and he batches them, but he'll do a couple of recordings on a day and he'll have a guest on for 60 minutes and he'll do like one episode that's 20 minutes long. He'll stop the recording, start it back up, start another episode, and then that goes 20 minutes, and then stop it, do another episode. Now that's the 3rd episode. So
that's cool.
In one recording, he gets 3 episodes.
Yeah.
So it's there's method behind the madness, but it's worked for him really well. He's like a bestseller on Amazon for like he has a couple books out now and that sort of thing, and he's making a massive impact in the people that he's like kind of influencing in a way and putting out. And just we've done that for 5 years now. And he's approaching 10 million downloads on his podcast. And obviously, like when you're putting out 3 a day, that's it's a lot of content. But he's committed to it. So
that's awesome. I mean, that's a lot of content though. Like 3 episodes a day.
He's dedicated to it.
Like having people to even bring on that too. That's a whole logistical.
He was one of the most non-rude, persistent people I've ever met. Like, he's really good at like follow up and that sort of thing and getting people on and kind of encouraging them to be on. And it does help his large presence now is like, people ask to be on his podcast now.
Yeah.
But he'll have like repeat guests and that sort of thing.
That's awesome. So the main goal for this podcast is about sharing tips and tricks and things that people can utilize to grow their social media, grow their business, grow their personal, achievements. So I'm going to go to the meat of it now to kind of, I know you have a lot of really great tips and great things that you can share. So the very first question I have for you is, so what types of content tend to resonate best with on social media?
It depends on the audience. That's always like a favorite one-liner by marketers is it depends. But it truly does. So drastic examples. If I'm a teenager and I'm wanting to grow a following because I do prank videos, well, my audience is going to be so much different. And what I do as a video is going to be so much different than if I'm a real estate educator and I'm trying to teach people how to wholesale real estate, right? So what I always encourage is study your top influencers in your specific area of expertise. So for instance, if I'm trying to, teach people how to wholesale real estate, I'm going to look at, okay, who's the top influencers that teach people how to wholesale real estate? Now, it's not necessarily to just like mimic what they're doing. You want to make sure you're crafting it to your own messaging and to your own specific, ideas and your situation scenarios and things that you can teach. But it's marketing 101 is, market analysis. I'm looking at my competitors, what they're doing, what works. And then from there, it's just crafting it to, what the platforms want. So something that we're testing now that we've seen a few big influencers do is the whole, you typically like an influencer, you're going to see a talking head video and then there's captions on the screen and that sort of thing. And it's clipped from a podcast or something like that. That's pretty, that's pretty standard. And now I'm starting to see where they're actually like showing a very short clip that's like Alex Ramosi's doing this a lot, where he'll do like a 5 or 10 second clip of him
Interesting.
saying one thing. And the reason why that's important too is like going into a really, really huge tip is the reason why I like that is because he understands that social media is like the algorithm is based on retention rates. It's how long of the video did somebody watch for.
Yeah.
So if they only have 10 seconds to watch the video because that's how long it is, even if they watched 3 seconds of it, they still watched 30% of the video.
That's crazy.
As opposed to if it's a 60-second video,
that's like 3%. That's
you know what
really
I'm saying?
smart. Yeah,
so
that's
like stuff like that is the kind of stuff I'm looking for, and that changes a lot. So
Yeah.
social media might change. Now, that's pretty standard because YouTube kind of standardized that where they will show your organic core video to audiences depending on the retention rate. It's click-through rate and retention rate. So if, for example, if I put out a 30-second video and my drop off is like, if 100 people get presented the video in the organic feed and everybody's dropping off 3 seconds in, well, Instagram or YouTube Shorts or whatever is going to just decide, well, nobody wants to watch the video, so
Yeah.
we're not going to show it to anybody else. Then you get the dud numbers. Then you get like 50 views or 60 views. That's how it works. It's
Yeah.
pretty simple. But that kind of stuff, you just have to keep an eye on, engage it. And then that's where kind of like the culmination of the answer is it depends.
Depends. Totally get it. So if for somebody's watching this video, what would you recommend for like structure? For example, what would be a structure that they can follow to produce social media content?
Yeah. So it's really going to be dependent on the person that you're dealing with. For example, I've shot videos. I don't really do this that much anymore, but when I first got into the business, I was doing this a whole lot more. I'll go on site with clients and shoot videos with them, right? And I've probably shot videos with over 300 real estate investors, and out of those 300, I've only had maybe 2 that could read off a teleprompter and actually remain human. Because for the most part, like if you're a coach or you're an educator or an influencer, that means you probably are familiar with speaking and being on video and that sort of thing. But when you're dealing with like a lot of times I would go into an office of a real estate investor and I would film like their closing coordinator. Their closing coordinator would need to do a video that's geared towards, who they're working with. And that closing coordinator's probably never been on video before. And for them to read off a teleprompter, I would have to spend an hour plus trying to train them and go through the prompts with them so that they remain human and don't sound like a robot. They have emotion in what they're doing and that sort of thing. Because that's the primary purpose for video, right? Is
Yeah.
to like show emotion, like it's connecting. When I can't be face to face with you, I'm through a screen. I already lose that like face to face, belly to belly interaction. And so if you remain like a robot and you're not showing emotions, that sort of thing, it's really hard to kind of gear that towards. So if you're able to get on video and riff, and this is all just knowing yourself, right? If you're able to literally like list out your topics, and I know you do this too, is like making sure that you batch your content. Don't try to film a video a day.
Yeah.
Film like your entire week's worth of video in one day and make sure you slot that out for your week. Or even like there's some people that I work with, they film once a quarter. So literally 2 straight days, they film once a quarter and they don't have to worry about it for the,
Yeah.
yeah. So doing that's important. But I think a lot of it is based off your planning. The example I gave about Michael who records 3 videos, like, daily and puts out 3 podcasts a day. He's dedicated to creating content. That's what he wants to do. And so he has it all planned out on his side. I think for the normal person as a standard answer is to have your topics listed out. And we can go into a conversation about like, well, how do you get your topics? two short answers is, number one, if you're in business, you probably have customers. You're literally list out every single question a customer has ever asked you, or a client has ever asked you, or a lead has ever asked you. That's a topic right there. And then from there, go to ChatGTP, give it a prompt. It'll list out topics.
Yeah. That's one thing I typically recommend for people to do too. Utilize the technology to be able to do that. One thing that we started doing with some of our clients here is basically they show up, do ChatGPT, and having somebody asking them all those questions.
Yeah.
And that way they just kind of answer it naturally. And that way they can just like create a whole bunch, insert a whole bunch of questions.
Yeah.
By batching it that way, they have tons of content that they can post over time.
Absolutely. And that's probably the method I would recommend the most, is doing it that way. That's really good. And having somebody on the other side of the camera, it is really a talent to be able to like set up a camera yourself and then record the videos on your own, staying on target, getting all of your topics out without fumbling around. That's an art. But when you have somebody on the other side of the camera helping you out with that, it's different, because now you're only focused on getting out the information as opposed to like the technology side of it, making sure it's recording. Oh, does the sound right? Like that sort of thing. But then also you could leverage that person to ask you the question, like prompt you.
Yeah.
Like, Jet, all right, tell me, here's your topic. Tell me about X, Y, and Z. And then you look at the camera and then answer it. That's typically the best way to do it.
Yeah, I've had somebody come here and within like 20, 30 minutes, it was able to record over 30 pieces of content.
Yeah. Yeah. It's if you have that planned out that way.
Yeah. And knowing your stuff too, like, and being able to communicate that effectively on camera as well. Yeah. So obviously talking about technologies and trends and all the stuff that is consistently evolving, how do you stay ahead of the curve?
I always believe that consumption of what it is you're doing is highly important. Now, I will say this, and this is not for me to like be vulnerable and that sort of thing, but I'll just be 100% honest. I'm not obsessive about social media. I don't love social media. I don't naturally I actually really love YouTube. Like I love you. Podcast is cool, but like for me, social media is a lot more like I'm consuming. I don't go to social media to learn stuff, right? That's just me. And I know a lot of people do, but I don't do that. I go there to be entertained if I want to.
Yeah.
But I think that consumption is important. So anytime I'm going through, and it's also like observation. So for instance, this can be weird to some people, but like if I'm, sitting, let's say I go to the dentist and I'm sitting and there's somebody next to me and they're on their phone. Sometimes I'll like cut my eyes over and see what they're doing and just see what their actions are. And I do this to my wife a lot too, is like, because her favorite's Instagram. And so she'll go on Instagram and I'll watch the way she scrolls through, what she stops on, what she actually turns the volume on for. Like I'm looking for those cues to see how people actually interact with social media. And this is why analytics are important. Analytics, by the way, guys, is not for vanity. It's not for like, how many views did I like? You need to be looking at analytics from a standpoint of how to make it better.
Yeah.
And that's what that's the intended purpose of analytics is, you're looking at retention rates, you're looking at click-through rates, you're looking at the kind of stuff that's going to tell you how to improve your content, not just that it sucks, right? If your analytics are saying that your views are really low, your subscriber count's really low or whatever, don't just focus on that. Think about like, why is it that way?
Yeah.
And figure out why it's going on. And that's not just for my sake in social media and learning, how all that works. It's for any business that you do, any business. Real estate is the same way. I mean, ask any real estate investor that you and I know, they're probably daily consuming news on what's going on in social media. How is the market looking? What are interest rates at? How are realtors reacting to this new update that just came out? Like that kind of thing is what they're looking at because they're studying their practice.
That's awesome. So can you walk me through the process of creating a compelling video for social media?
It's pretty simple, honestly. There's really 3 core functions to that specifically. Now, I will say this does apply to every single video that you put out. Even if so for instance, this, like typically if you're going to do social media content, you'll normally see it one of 2 ways. It's going to be shot directly, like I'm looking directly at the camera, specifically intentionally recording a video vertically for social. So whatever I say is going to be under 60 seconds, right? And then that goes out that way. I know a lot of influencers do that. The other way is you're chopping it from larger content. So this podcast is going to get chopped into 4 or 5 different pieces, and then that's going to go out. It applies to both of these. You have to start off with a strong hook, and it needs to be within like a 2 or 3 second time span. And sometimes you don't even have that long. Normally, the method that I use is, and I tell my team this as we're editing videos, is a very bold statement or a very bold question. Typically, that's the hook right there. And even if you're chopping a clip from a large piece of content, sometimes like the meat of the video doesn't start off well. So maybe you go find a little statement at the beginning and clip it to the meat.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So like there's a little bit of like editing that goes into that. But that part is the most important. And that takes care of your click-through rate, right? And your thumb stopping abilities. Then the next part of it is the retention rate. Now you got to hold their attention. And you do that by delivering value / entertainment. Valuetainment, I guess is the way you want to call it. So like on social media nowadays, there's a lot of movement in videos, a lot of like pop-ups and the captions look cool and stuff like that. Like that's all. The reason for that is just not to make the video look cool. It's to keep engagement going.
Yeah.
And then the last part of it's a call to action. So typically call to action should make up no more than 10% of your video. So if you have a 60-second video, your call to action should not be more than 5 or 6 seconds. It should be whatever you want it to be. It could be, follow me for more content like this, or if you're interested in this, make sure you go direct message me this word and I'll send you this free book or whatever.
Yeah.
Like that's the 3 core functions of the compelling video. If you keep it that simple, like all your videos should, intentionally be created correctly.
That's awesome. So how do we ensure then your videos to stand out in a very, very crowded digital landscape?
Yeah, that's a hairy question. You don't really have a choice in the matter from a algorithm perspective. My conversation is always going to go back to giving yourself enough at bats. If you are only putting out 1 social media video a week or 3 social media videos a week, that can be really hard to stand out in the noise. And generally speaking, like it's a conversation of, the more content creators that are on a platform. And this is like, we could talk about how TikTok kind of emerged is because there was a lot of creators from the start, and then that accumulates the audience. That's how that works. We saw a perfect example. Now, the aftermath of this is a bad example, but we saw a perfect example of this. You remember Clubhouse? Clubhouse it popped huge. It was crazy how fast that grew because there were so many creators that went to that platform and it accumulated a massive audience with it. So that's the conversation. So the conversation doesn't go like, is there enough people to consume your videos? There definitely is. To me, the way you stand out is by crafting your message and your value and your delivery as thoroughly as possible. So it's quality. A lot of people focus solely on quality, but it's quality plus quantity. You need to make sure you give yourself enough at bats. You need to make sure you're putting out enough quantity. And if you ask me, well, what's the right quantity? How many videos do I put out? You got to test it. You got to part of marketing, in my opinion, 75% of marketing is testing and
100%.
figure out what works and what doesn't. And if you put out 1 video a day and that does well for you, then stick to it. Maybe you ramp that up to, 10 a week or 12 a week, and then you go up to 2 a day.
Yeah.
Volume, just because you put out 10 videos a day doesn't mean that you're going to be successful.
Yeah.
So you got to gauge it.
Yeah. We started being more intentional and also more consistent in our social media too. I think as of February 27, we started posting daily and 1 piece of content every single day. And it's been like this podcast is recorded maybe 4 or 5 weeks after that. We've gained over 60 followers on social media just by being consistent and producing more, being more intentional about it. And obviously we always
snowballs.
Yeah. And we were mostly focused on our clients and doing things for them and not necessarily doing anything for us.
Right.
But now that we're doing that, and preaching what we, teach, we're definitely seeing a lot of really great results from that. So, I have a couple more questions. So how important would you say storytelling is as part of creating social content?
Storytelling is one of those things that I've dug into, and I've tried to put a little bit more effort into, like, so I'll just tell you right now, and I told you, like, before we started the podcast, if there's a question that I'm like, I'm not really the expert on it, this is probably that one.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say I'm an expert in storytelling, and that just comes from a perspective of, like, I think the storytelling part of it comes from the way that the message is delivered in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, like, I know, like, the whole um oh, what's is it Donald Miller, I think, is the one who authors the story
Story
brand.
brand. Yeah. Donald Miller.
I think that's a great method to follow, and the primary reason I think that's a good method to follow is because it helps the person nail down their target avatar. That's really the most valuable function to that system, because it helps you figure out what type of messaging that you need to deliver. And to me, that's really all you need to do. Now, I also, like, am not an expert storyteller, so I can't say that, like, that's the whole truth. That's just from what I've seen
Yeah.
work for my clientele. Is the story that's being told is what's being voiced on the video that's going out. And, for instance, like, I'll go back to the example of Michael Zuber, the guy who puts out 3 episodes a week. Like, his message is very clear. It's in his branding. It's one rental at a time. Now, he talks about a lot of, like, financial news and stuff like that, but his whole thing is to help people that are trapped in the 9 to 5 become financially free by investing in real estate. And as long as he follows that narrative within the video content that he's putting out, that's telling the story altogether right there. And to me, it's like, a lot of people look at storytelling and story branding and the marketing functions of storytelling. They think it's like a page 1 through page 300, and that's where it stops. To me, it's an ongoing novel. Like, it's never going to stop as long as you're in business and you're marketing your business.
Yeah.
It's always going to be a story that you have to continue to tell. And I think that's where a lot of people get in trouble. They think, like, oh, I gotta tell the story here, and then they run out of content ideas and topics, and then are like, what else? I don't even know what else to talk about, Josh. Like, well, say it again,
Yeah.
because you may not say the same thing that you did on the last video that you did.
Yeah. And I've heard too, a lot of people say that it takes about 7 times for your
Exactly.
message to
It
even,
takes a
like,
hell of a lot
I
more
know.
times than that.
Yeah, 7 times for the message to, like, really start, like, resonating with the audience.
Bearing fruit.
Yeah.
I think since it's funny that you bring so, like, yes, that is definitely a thing. But to me, I think, like, before, so it's for somebody to start hearing your message. Then if you take it a step further, for them to start spending money with you, for them to actually convert in any way, shape, or form, it's like 300 to 400 touches. So they need to see your videos a couple hundred times before they actually buy something from you. And that's short form specifically, but generally that's the way you got to kind of approach things.
Yeah.
So,
It takes time to build trust and authority.
it does. And
Yeah.
a lot of it depends on how much your product is, and what your pricing model looks like and that sort of thing. But
Yeah.
if you're giving people a free plus shipping book offer, then normally your conversion process is going to be pretty easy. But then at that point, then you're a funnel. So now you can market to them in other ways.
Yeah. So I have 2 more questions for you. The very first one, if you had to share one tip or trick for somebody that is just now starting to create social media content, what would you tell them?
Stay consistent for a year and don't stop. If you do stop, then you have no reason to complain. That's, like, to me, I'll have people be like, well, I'm afraid to be on camera. I don't know what to say. And the way I look at it is, like, and I generally deal with business owners. Not generally, I primarily and 100% deal with business owners. So I'm not out there, like, with a, content creator that's trying to build a following because they design closets, that sort of thing, like that, or they, they do art or whatever. It's a business. You have to leverage social media. You have to leverage podcasts or YouTube or whatever content you're doing as marketing. A lot of people like to detach it, and then when they start seeing, like, my followers aren't growing or my videos aren't getting more views, they just stop it altogether because it's not working, and they did it for 3 months.
Yeah.
That's just not the way this works. And it's a different type of marketing. For instance, if you're a real estate investor and you're doing, SEO, that's going to be a completely different strategy from doing direct mail. That's going to be a completely different strategy from doing TV ads. That's going to be a different strategy from running PPC campaigns. And then the list goes on. But for whatever reason, people like to take social media and say, 3 months, chalk it up, didn't work. I tried it. I don't have to do it anymore. It's just not the way this thing works. you stay consistent for a year, if you commit to a year and you're not getting the results and you're putting out reasonable quality plus quantity content, then maybe you could start having a conversation of, well, maybe this isn't the right move for me.
Yeah.
But I promise you, if you stay consistent, you give yourself enough at bats, you're putting out as high quality content as you can. That includes the visuals and the audios, but also includes your messaging and what you're saying, the value. And you do that for a year consistently, then you will see movement and you'll want to continue. And then maybe you'll see a little bit of a dip. Don't stop then. Just keep going because it will benefit results for you in the long run. Like, look at anybody that's successful on social. For the most part, unless they paid for the traffic, if they only did organic, they've done it for a very long time.
Yeah. You touched on something very important, and I want to reiterate that. A lot of people think when they think about quality, they think about the camera that they use or the other stuff. So quality is quality of the cameras or the things that you shoot, but also includes quality in the messaging, quality in like all the other different aspects of it to basically really create a compelling message out there.
So if we did this exact podcast, and we did it over Zoom, maybe we should test this. If we did this exact podcast over Zoom, and even if I had my good camera set up and like, you know, I was feeding my DSLR camera as a webcam to my computer and whatnot, if we clipped content from this recording versus that recording, I guarantee you this recording would get more engagement. And it's not just because the setup and like how many cameras we have and the lighting and all that. It's just, it appears more professional. And a lot of the ways this works is appearance. And now I'm not saying that everybody needs to go and build out a studio like Jets, or, you know, they need to go invest in a $20,000 build out in their office and that sort of thing and buy all kinds of camera equipment, that sort of thing. But you do need to invest in some decent recordings. And iPhones work for a lot of people, like as long as you got good lighting and you have good quality audio and that sort of thing. But to me, that you don't start off like this. A lot of people want to start off like that. Like I could probably name names for you of people that are in masterminds that we're in. And I'm like, I've had these conversations with them. I'm like, so how many social media videos you put out? Oh, nothing. But I feel like I need to build out a studio like Steve Trang, or I need to build out a studio like, you know, like Gary has or whatever. Like, buddy, that's not where you start. They didn't start there. Everybody starts at ground zero, and then they build up from there. So to me, if you can't stay consistent recording videos on your iPhone and then, you know, make it as good a quality as you can there, you're not going to stay consistent with a build out like this.
Yeah.
You're just not. So start there, focus on quality as best you can from a technology standpoint, but then that's your opportunity to focus on the quality of what's coming out of your mouth, like the value that you're delivering. And then obviously like doing it enough times volume, and then you'll start to, you know, you get just like everything else, you just get better and better over time.
Awesome. Man, it's been a lot of fun being here with you. And I think we need to have a follow up to this one.
Yeah.
You know, a part 2.
Every time I'm in Tampa, I'll come over here.
There we go. But last question for you. How, if somebody is interested in learning more about you, how would they get a hold of you and how would they get to work with you?
So you can, to me, honestly, like the most direct way you could get to me is through social media. Just look up Josh Culler on Instagram or Facebook, and I'm verified, so you'll find me. There's a lot of other Josh Cullers out there, but I'm the only verified one. So you find me there, and then you could obviously email me, josh@cullermedia.com, CULLER, and then you can go to cullermedia.com, CULLER media.com, and find me there. And then, you know, anything I could do for anybody, just tell me Jet sent you, and then you got it.
There you go. Well, there you have it. Well, it was a blast to have you here, man. I'm looking forward to the next time.
Yeah.
So yeah, for anybody that is watching this, I hope that you find some value in the conversation that we've had today. And if we have some pretty amazing podcasts coming up, so I would highly encourage you to hit that subscribe button. Your boy would greatly appreciate that. And again, Josh, thank you so much for
so much fun.
coming to the That's So Fire podcast.
It was fire. Yes, it was fire.
Appreciate it. There you go. Have a fantastic rest of your day. Let's go, baby. It's fire.